Welcome to PRCA's podcast Fuse, the global podcast for PR, communications and marketing professionals. Our special guest today is Crispin Manners. He is an author, an agency veteran. So before we welcome Crispin, I'm just going to set the scene and tell you a little bit about Crispin. So Crispin, he was the CEO of Kaizo. He led the company to be the fastest growing PR company in the UK at the time, the number 2 performer over a decade, and the number 5 best PR firm to work at. He had clients from Unilever to Cisco. He then became the chairman of the PRCA and a founding fellow of the PRCA in 2010. He also a director of WorldCom PR Group for Europe, Middle East, Africa, and on the global board of WorldCom PR Group. It's the largest independent partnership of PR firms in the world. Also, he is the co-author of a wonderful book called Grow, Build, Sell, Live. And I've got it right here to show you, because actually I started reading this book before I had even realized that I'll have the good luck and fortune of interviewing Crispin. And he also has written another book, which I also have over here, which I am reading at the moment. And it's about how to sell value demystified, a practical guide for communication agencies. So we're incredibly lucky to have Crispin because we're going to talk through his books as well as his career. Now, he's now the CEO of Onva Consulting, and what they do is they deliver hands-on personal consulting to help agencies grow. He's also the chairman of Inspiring Workplaces with the mission of changing the world by creating people-first organizations. And he has also served as a trustee for St. Joseph's Hospice, the UK's first ever hospice. Welcome, Crispin.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Crispin, I would love to start off with just a little bit about your typical workday in your life. I'd love to know a little bit about how you start your day, your hours, how you consume media. Tell us, give us a little glimpse into your world.
Well, I guess I'm really lucky because my typical workday is different every day. I have a lot of fun working with some very smart agency leaders, and I get a buzz out of helping them make important decisions about how to increase the success of their agency. When I'm not doing that, because I live in beautiful South Devon, I've got lots of brilliant countryside to explore, stuff to do in the garden, play golf badly, all sorts of things.
Now, Crispin, the Japanese have a concept for purpose called ikigai. And I just wanted to know, what is your purpose when it comes to choosing how you've spent your time over the years in your career as well as your present focus?
Well, I guess, as we'll probably discuss a bit later, in the early part of my career, I don't think I really thought about my purpose as much as I should have done. Mm-hmm. So today, my purpose is to help people build businesses that make them happy, fulfilled, and that succeed by being people first.
Wonderful. Thank you. And now, just going back to how you started off, now I read a little bit about how you started off working with Dad and started off studying geography at university. And your father obviously was an entrepreneur and ran a number of different businesses, of which one was a PR agency that was founded in 1978 by Dad, and you joined 2 years later as employee number 3. What was it like working with your father and managing his transition out of the agency?
Well, I was very lucky to work with him because he was probably one of the finest PR people of his generation. He really understood how to connect with people and to create win-win scenarios for his clients and their audiences. Give you an example. When there was a revolution in Portugal in the 70s, one of his clients had their factory occupied by the workers. So they sent him out to get it back. And he negotiated with the leaders of the workers out there and explained to them the various benefits of handing back the factory and having sustainable employment. And so today, a lot of what we normally mean when we talk about PR is media relations, and his version of PR was very much direct communication with audiences. The other thing about working with him, I guess, is it was actually quite tough because he had higher expectations of me than other people in the business. What you might call reverse nepotism, if you like.
When you took over at the agency's helm, you decided to focus on the tech market. So this was sort of 2 years in, you took the agency over from Dad, and you decided to pivot and focus on the tech market. And you, obviously, that was a great call because you witnessed exponential growth. What lessons in managing growth can you share with our audience? Because of course, it sounds wonderful to have this great exponential growth, but there's also other sides to managing growth. So for those who are listening who are either experiencing growth in their agency or have done so in the past or will do so hopefully, when the industry gets back on track, what advice and lessons would you give?
Well, that's probably a topic for a whole session of its own. But I guess if you looked at us back then, we probably looked like we ticked all the success boxes when it comes to growing an agency. You very kindly mentioned a couple of them in the intro. But I guess what I learned is that we could have managed our growth much better if we'd had a clear picture of the destination that I wanted to reach. Because we were good, and I know that probably sounds a bit big-headed, but in one period, we won a client a week for 13 weeks and then decided we'd better stop, otherwise we'd fall over. So because we were good, we won lots of business. But the reality is our win rate started to make decisions for us about more people to hire, more office space to rent, more investment in technology, having loads of different support services in-house, all sorts of things. And rather than us having a clear plan about who we wanted to win and why, we just won the stuff that came our way. And it's what I call getting trapped on the hamster wheel of growth, because you're running hard, and although you're succeeding, you aren't really in total control. And I think with hindsight, we could have been much more in control of the growth than we were.
I think that's really useful, actually, a very useful lesson, because often we just blindly celebrate every client win, but not every client win is actually will have a good long-term impact upon the team, the culture, the financials. So really, just as careful as agencies are in hiring team members, they should also perhaps apply the same lens when they are bringing on client work as well, being really carefully sort of calibrated in how
I would probably say even more so, because when I talk to agency owners, it's usually bad fit clients that cause the most issues. Upset the team, demotivate the team, all sorts of things like that, which if they'd been more selective in the first, if they had a clearer idea of the behavior that they want from a client and were more selective in the first place, then lots of those issues that agencies suffer from, they probably wouldn't encounter.
What I thought was quite interesting is not only when you were running Kaizo, it was a very high growth agency, it also was ranked the top 5 place to work. Now, somebody, there's this, um, you know, people often say you sort of choose, you choose on performance and growth, or you choose on culture and happy team. You managed to do both.
Uh, yeah, I think we did reasonably well at that. I mean, we were far from being perfect, but um, one of the reasons I think we had a reasonable balance is that we tried to let people have the freedom to make a difference and develop in the direction that worked best for them.
Mm-hmm.
And this wasn't just in terms of career; it was outside career as well. So a fabulous guy that worked with me um, for a long time. We hired as a senior account exec,
Yeah.
and he ended up being the managing director of our PR division.
Oh, wow.
Um, and another guy who's a really lovely man. We hired him straight out of university,
Mm-hmm.
and we helped him set up as a sole trader when he was a senior account director, because at that point it was clear both to him and me that although he enjoyed the craft of PR, he didn't enjoy the business of PR.
Mm.
So he's now run that business, I guess, for 15 years, and he's much happier and probably better rewarded than
Yeah.
if he had tried to carry on plugging away within an agency scenario.
Yeah. So
I guess the other thing for me is that uh, testament to the way that our people developed is that when we were no longer able to offer them what they needed to continue to grow,
yeah.
I think it was great that they ended up getting brilliant jobs in other really good agencies, and many of them went on to run the agencies that they joined,
Yeah.
including again one of our directors ended up being the leader of Hill and Knowlton in Europe.
That's
So
fantastic.
I
That's a
think
great testimony.
we gave them a great foundation for a career.
Now, some say opportunity and crisis are two separate things, and others actually find opportunity in crisis. Now, you experienced a dot-com crash, 9/11, and after this exponential growth through focusing on the tech industry, the agency suffered a slowdown in client spending. And that's when you started to develop this value proposition to guarantee client results, which won the CBI Innovative Company of the Year award. Now, how does this proposition work? And why do you think PR agencies are so focused on charging according to account time, and account time is based upon seniority and quantity of hours, as opposed to focusing on an alternative billing method?
Um, Again, quite a big topic. In terms of how our methodology worked, it was actually really simple in the
Hmm.
sense that rather than just taking a brief from a client, and most agency owners will know that briefs that you get are usually pretty vague,
Yeah.
raise our awareness or something. Um, so rather than doing that, what we realized we had to do is we had to connect what we were doing back to what the client's business was trying to achieve. So we started, we ran workshops with clients face to face so that we could surface the business reason behind why they wanted to invest in PR. And then we did something which almost never happens, is we confronted the client in a workshop scenario with the barriers that they would encounter to achieving those objectives. Normally, PR agencies hide that. They want to appear like miracle workers,
Yeah.
um, and therefore clients kind of take for granted the results they get as a result.
Mm.
And by surfacing objectives and the barriers to those objectives, we were then able to um, outline with the client a strategy for getting to where they wanted to get to, And we were able to guarantee certain results based on that strategy, but only if they followed it.
Yeah.
So that worked for us because it put us much more in control of the work that we did, because the clients understood why they had to go in a particular direction.
I really like that, because, sometimes over the years we've had clients who wanted to have a certain result, I don't know, let's say some top tier media by a specific outlet, but yet they didn't invest in their brand. So their brand and their digital touch points were quite weak. And so, sometimes I think as PR people, we're pleasers. So we don't say, listen, if you want X, you need to sort out this, because it all has a cumulative impact upon the perception journey of a journalist, for instance, if we're talking about media relations. And I think sometimes we can be quite shy in stating that the client needs to fix certain things in order to, and those are the barriers. So I think that's a really elegant solution, is to actually say, here's your objectives. Let's be a little bit of a negative Nancy and talk about these are the objectives, but then let's take it back to being positive and talk about how can we overcome them. And that requires work from client side as well as obviously agency side, and some strategic thinking along the way. Absolutely love it. Now, do you think, just touching upon PRs as people pleasers, do you think that there's a confidence gap between PR people and their counterparts in professional services, such as lawyers or, the management consultants? Is it because we are inherently people pleasers? We often have a huge over-servicing issue, sometimes up to 20% for a lot of agencies, sometimes more. And the underlying reasons, because we seek to please, and we have a low confidence of ourselves and our profession.
Well, I think part of the answer to that question is the other question you just asked, which is why do PR people persist with time-based selling rather than other alternatives? And I think the challenge with the time-based approach, which agencies pursue, because it's much easier to calculate what the price can be. It's a very straightforward algorithm. But secondly, they resist moving in a different direction, because they say things like, we can't guarantee results, and we're not the only contributor to results. But both of those things mean that that the agency isn't in control of how they respond to the client. In terms of being people pleasers, I do a lot with the agencies I help around psychometric profiling to identify natural behavioral preferences. And there is no doubt that the PR sector attracts people who have a natural preference to please.
So fascinating.
But on top of that, I think there are plenty of people who work in agencies where that is not their natural preference. But then other things kick in, which end up meaning that agencies say yes way more than they should.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, for the guys who aren't people pleasers, is lack of confidence about where the next bit of revenue will come from. And so I think lack of confidence is probably the biggest reason why agencies keep saying yes, or if you like, don't say no as often as they should.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, with a lot of work moving from sort of annual retainers to project, that uncertainty of income becomes even more of an insecurity that then sort of drives PR people to be more malleable and perhaps not as robust when they are discussing the sort of objectives to the barriers to the objectives.
I think you're talking about the move from retainer to project. I mean, I think that's a shift of our making, because we don't guarantee anything. And if you think about pay-per-click doesn't guarantee that the client will sell more. It just guarantees that if someone clicks on a link, they'll arrive at their website.
Yeah.
And I think PR people need to recognize that we don't need to guarantee an absolute result. We
Mm-hmm.
just have to be able to demonstrate where we deliver a significant contribution towards achieving that result.
Yeah.
And the sooner we do that, the more likely it is not only that will clients make longer term commitments to us,
Mm-hmm.
but we'll be able to command a much better price.
Yeah. Absolutely. So one of the things that I picked up in your book, which really struck me, was, we often think about how can we be more efficient. We're so time focused. And my diary is sort of like, God, it's, every 15 minutes, it's sort of, there's scheduling going on. But what I thought was quite interesting is that you looked at not just time as a resource, but actually you looked at energy levels. And I think it came from your past experience when you were running your own agency, where over a period of time you started to have a bit of an epiphany that it's not just about how you allocate your time. It's about having the awareness of how you feel when you are doing different types of work, whether you feel drained or actually it becomes energizing, and how important it is for agency leaders to manage their energy levels. So for those who are listening who've never really thought about energy, they've always just thought about how can I be more efficient in terms of time. What would you say to them?
Well, I can't emphasize enough the importance of focusing on where you draw your energy from. I think that the challenge for agency owners is that as their business grows, they end up trying to do everything. They do the finances, they do the people stuff, they do the client stuff, they do the selling, they do everything. And many of those things, which they're probably perfectly capable of doing, many of those things will just drain them of energy.
Yeah.
And that's a major mistake, because the founder, leader, owner, leadership group, whatever you want to say, they're the energy source for the agency.
Mm.
And if their batteries are running low, agency simply doesn't perform as well as it should.
Yeah.
So a lot of what I try and do with the agencies I help is I try and get the leaders to recognize what their energy sources are, what their energy drains are,
Mm.
and then build the team so that the important things that have to happen in the agency are done by people who are energized by doing them,
Mm.
rather than the
Mm.
reverse.
That's so true, because often we become generalists, and you end up sort of doing a bit of media relations, a bit of strategy, a bit of measurement, a bit of press clippings or whatever, a bit of client management and so forth. And actually, when you look at the wide array of PR duties in organizations that aren't highly specialized, you do end up having a lot of energy seepage, because people are doing some bits that they love and some bits that they are drained by. And that affects so much more than just the client work. It affects well-being and culture. Now, you mentioned in the book, this particular one that I read a few months ago, you mentioned how important it is to have an articulated purpose, and to not only articulate the purpose and stick it on your website and then nobody ever recalls it accurately, but actually to have a purpose and really embed it into the organization by creating an alignment framework that has that clearly stipulates this is the purpose and this is how to align it in these different functions in these different ways, and use it as a way for regular reporting with various different teams within agencies. I thought that was absolutely fantastic and a great takeaway. Did you come up with that when you were running your own agency, and has that been trialed and tested with other agencies?
The answer is no, I didn't when I was running Kaizo. I it, it the alignment frameworks that I use with agencies is actually based on a proven methodology called OGSM, which is objectives, goals, strategies, measures. I've adapted it to make it even more meaningful down at the individual employee level. OGSM as a framework tends to be used to give an overall sense of where the organization is heading. But what I've found by working with lots of other organizations, not just PR agencies, is that the disconnect between strategy and real delivery is at an individual employee level. And quite often, employees can't translate what's said at a high level into their day-to-day work. So I've built the framework to operate at, I guess, 3 levels: company-wide, so it's clear where the organization is going; at an individual team, so it's clear what the team is trying to achieve and how they will contribute to what the company is trying to do; and then at an individual level, so that they understand how the work they do contributes to the team and to the company. And obviously, the more clarity people have about that, the better they perform.
Yeah. I think I think the sort of psychology underpins the framework, because it gives people a sense of direction, and also it requires a lot less micromanaging, because actually people know exactly what they need to do. They need to know what they need to contribute to. And so therefore it's not constantly having to steer people in the right direction, which becomes obviously exhausting for managers. Now, we talked earlier about client selection and how you have to be extremely careful about what clients you take on. I wanted to understand that there's been quite a lot of debate in the industry over what sort of clients should PR agencies take on. Should it be the cab rank principle of taking on any clients? There's other agencies that say we're not going to take on clients that are fossil fuels or from the sin industries, tobacco, gambling, porn, for instance. Others are like, we don't want to work with governments that have human rights abuses, and others, other countries that are non-persona to the sort of like to the country that they're operating from. What would be your recommended approach for agencies when they are thinking about creating some sort of client acquisition decision-making tree to figure out, what do they say yes to, what do they say no to?
So it's interesting. A lot of the examples you gave about being clear about who you wanted to work for were negatively described, in the sense that you wouldn't want to work for terrorist organizations or drug runners or whatever. I think it's and there is a place for that, clearly, but I think being selective about clients should be positively derived, in the sense of who do you most want to work for. So rather than who don't you want to work for, who do you most want to work for? And in deciding that, I think there are a couple of really important things. One is choosing clients that you work for that share the purpose that you've identified for you and your agency. I help a brilliant agency. They're only about 3 years old, and they've already won about 25 awards. And one of the reasons why they're performing so well is, from day one, they've had total clarity that they only want to work with organizations who will help to improve the health of the nation. And that automatically gives a filter for. So although they're good, and because they're good, they have people approach them as a great agency, award-winning agency. If the client doesn't improve the health of the nation, they'll walk away. So I think that's the first point. Having a shared purpose with the clients that you want to work with.
Yeah.
I think that the second point is having total clarity about the behavior that you want the client to demonstrate. And that could be anything you want it to be, anything that's important to you. But a lot of the agencies I work with, I mean, they want clients to listen to their advice. They want clients to treat them reasonably. And one agency had one of the largest companies in the world approach them in mid-December last year, and asked them to put a pitch together. And like many of these pitches, they asked them to come up with 3 fully scoped out creative ideas, and they expected the full proposal to be sent to them by the 28th of December, recognizing that in this particular country, the agency would shut down on about the 20th and wouldn't come back to work till about the 4th of January. So they completely ignored all of that and said, if you want our business, you guys are going to have to work through your Christmas holiday. The agency owner said, if they're going to treat us like that in the winning of it, imagine how they're going to treat us when we've won it. So they walked away.
Yeah. Well, I think that's brilliant, because you're right. If that's their behavior when you're getting to know each other, then, what will they be like later on? I absolutely love that. Now, not only should you be selective, obviously, with clients, so in terms of purpose, in terms of behavior as well, so not just looking at, sort of sector. You also discuss an awful lot in your book about the true cost of pitching. So I think it's not only sort of deciding what type of clients you want to work for, but also being really aware of how much it costs an agency to pitch. For me, I always thought, well, surely it's just the hours that you spend knocking up a proposal and having a couple of meetings trying to digest and understand their brief. What other costs are there?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's a great question, because most agencies I talk to haven't even calculated how much time and effort they put into pitching, because they see it as a necessary cost on the business. But the reality is, once you start to fully identify what it takes, I mean, when we were at Kaizo and we were pitching for big brand clients, I mean, they were always complex pitches. I mean, you'd have to qualify the brief, you'd have to brainstorm ideas, you'd have to write a proposal, you'd have to put a pitch deck together, you'd be rehearsing, usually the night before. And even if you got through round 1, you might have to go through round 2. I mean, when I calculated out what a complex pitch would cost across all the people in the team contributing, it worked out about 28 days of time. Okay, and at today's sort of modest bill rates, that's about £25,000 of billable fees. Now, I know some pitches won't be that costly, but complex ones coming out about 25 grand. Now, again, I'll give you an example of a client that I help. They had their best year ever this year. And when we were talking about their sales process, they won, they're a decent size agency. They won 35 new clients, but they lost 50 pitches.
Oh.
And 50 pitches at the sort of numbers I'm talking about doesn't just equate to 1.5 million of billable fees, but it equates to 7 people. And when agencies say we never have enough people, first place I'd suggest they look is their sales process, because this agency is using up 7 people, the time of 7 people to lose pitches.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Many
of which they would not have had a chance of winning in the first place.
So really having that awareness and of how much a pitch actually costs. And again, just going back to your book, it's not just about the hours, it's the energy. it's the energy. Of course, when you win, it's euphoric, but also onboarding new clients takes a lot of headspace, and a sort of an understanding the client and the client preferences. So there's a great deal of disruption, that
and negative impact on the team. I mean, again, when agency owners are honest about their win rates, most of them win less than 50% of the time. And the impact, if you think about that, let's say you win 4 out of 10, that means you lose 6 out of 10. And if you're an account exec or an account manager, and 6 out of the 10 pitches you're involved with you lose, you start to question whether this agency is any good.
But also, wouldn't you, isn't there also a growing trend where people who are inviting agencies to pitch, instead of are inviting quite a wide array of agencies, and you hear these terrible stories of 10 agencies invited to pitch. So as the number of agencies being invited to pitch increases, the sort of win rate decreases.
Yeah, I mean, but that's a problem of our making, because we don't make it completely explicit about the value that the client will get if they hire us. We also, if we went online now and we looked at 30 different agencies, 26 of them would look almost the same. The language would be the same, the terminology would be the same, even the layout of the website would be very similar.
Yeah.
So if a client's looking and they can't see total clarity, then what choice do they have but to put a big pitch list together and see if in amongst all of that sameness, one agency stands out.
I hear you. Now, with the alignment framework, that obviously brings in a level of discipline and focus on purpose. You also talk at great length about the SCARF model and how that can really help PR agencies. And because obviously the biggest asset for PR agencies are the people. So how did you stumble across SCARF and have the realization that actually that's a model that PR agencies should really be thinking about?
Well, I think one of the benefit, if you're starting your own agency right now, one of the advantages you've got that I didn't have is that back then neuroscience wasn't as well developed as it is now. The point you made is, it's the old adage about PR: our assets walk out the door at the end of every day. If owners believe that, then they should really be looking at creating an environment which enables people to perform at their best. The neuroscience research that's been done in the last decade has uncovered all sorts of things that can help you run a better agency. SCARF is a particular framework that I use because the neuroscientist that created it has identified 5 needs our brain has to feel valued and valuable at work. And what they've been able to prove is that each of those 5 needs has a binary impact on you and your performance. If the need is met, it will trigger chemicals in the brain which enhance performance, make you happier. But the reverse is true. If it's not met, then chemicals in the brain which retard your performance. And in terms of performance, I'm talking about things which are fundamental to being a decent PR person, like being able to communicate, make decisions, listen, take risks, willing to embrace new ideas, all of those sort of things. But they're also connected to parts of the brain that control things like happiness or unhappiness. And one of them, the F in SCARF, which is about fairness, is actually connected to the part of the brain which controls pain. So when people say the way they treated really hurt, the neuroscientists have demonstrated why they're saying that, because it does hurt. So if you followed the SCARF framework, it gives not just the leadership, but also line managers and individuals in the team a very simple checklist they can follow to make sure that they try and create the best reaction with their colleagues and also with their clients.
So, for our listeners, if you're interested in these evidence-based and neuroscience models that have been created for culture, SCARF, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the mnemonic. So S is status, so relative importance to others, personal worth. C is certainty, the ability to predict the future. A is autonomy, sense of control over events. R is for relatedness, so feeling safe around others. And F is for fairness, a perception of people, interactions of fairness. And the two aspects to look at is actually the reward state activators and the threat state activators. So it's a fascinating model that I stumbled across when I was reading, Crispin, your book, which I'm very grateful that you have written, because I wish I read it at the beginning of setting up our agency. We've been running it for 14 years. And when I read your book, I thought, God, that is sort of, at least a decade's worth of the trials and errors and tribulations that all the agency people go through. And it was all in a book. And so I think people who are starting out agencies in the early years are incredibly lucky, because not only do they have, a lot more sort of neuroscience informed models to use, but they have, your books as well as others who have, gone through that journey, felt the pain, and they want to reduce the pain and increase the successful outcomes for the new breed of agencies that are out there now. So now I wanted to understand a little bit about your consulting firm, Onva. So you work with agencies because you've been there and you've done that, and you've, and you have won the wars and lost the wars, and you can kind of, you can share best practice. And for what it took sort of decades for you to accumulate, you can give within the space of, hours or weeks or whatever. Do you feel that Onva gives you the opportunity to help agencies to move faster and more robustly and provide a much healthier environment for its talent based upon the experiences that you've had leading your agency?
Yes, well, yeah, I do. One of the reasons I do is that I know in trying to build my agency, I made loads of mistakes. And I think working with me can help agency owners not make the same mistakes. But I think the reason I think I can help people avoid some of the errors that I didn't is because I ask them questions. So rather than just telling, oh, don't do that, I'll ask them questions which builds their own belief in their leadership and builds belief in what they're trying to create and how they're trying to create it. And I think belief is central to the success of every organization. And if it's clear that the leader has belief in what they're trying to create, then they can trigger that belief in the people that work for them. So for me, two key words that I try and help people develop is belief and belonging. It's a case of, do I believe in what this agency is trying to achieve, and therefore I'd like to work there? Yeah. And does the agency create this sense of belonging so that I wouldn't want to leave unless the life choices I makes it a sensible thing for me to do.
Now, you're also very passionate about staff engagement, employee engagement. So one of the questions I have for you is, what's the difference between employee engagement and employee communications, and how do they meet?
Okay, so I think the whole thing around employee engagement, employee experience, culture development, um, that they all have a part to play in creating an environment which enables people to bring their best self to work. Um, so, and I think as terms, I mean, a lot of these terms they kept going out of fashion. Um, I I I think communication lies at the heart of all things, both good and bad. And what organizations tend to do, particularly the larger they get, is they tend to try and create, if you like, silos of activity. So there'll be an internal comms team, and an engagement team, a sustainability team, all sorts of stuff. I, I, from an agency development point of view, I think it's much more important to bring it right back down to being purpose driven, and
Yeah.
for that to come from the heart of the leader or leadership team. Because if it does,
Mm.
then the things that they do each day should be consistent with that, and that level of consistency in what the organisation is trying to achieve transmits to the people that work there, and gives them a very clear choice: is this the right place for me,
Yeah.
or should I be working somewhere else?
Yeah. Now, COVID, I remember one of the incredible sort of impacts was actually CEOs started really caring about communications and internal communications and employee engagement, because they felt, my God, they're not physically here with us. How are we going to engage them? They're going to be just watching Netflix. How are we going to communicate with them? And when we can't have these water cooler, and actually, of course, COVID, the pandemic now, has passed. Is not at the height it was. But what has remained is the sort of the remote working, the hybrid working. And so it appears that, so therefore, sort of engagement and internal communications together are going to become increasingly just growing in importance, and purpose will become increasingly important, because you're not going to just have all people in the same room and sort of monitored by, I don't know, a manager with a with an eye on everyone's screen. We're sort of moving to a new era of of a highly sort of trusted relationship between organizations and their employees. Now, are you therefore hopeful that purpose, which is a huge motivator, and the articulation of that purpose and the embedding is going to increase over time as hybrid becomes normalized and there's more sort of remote work? And have you adapted your approach to culture and engaging teams, knowing that we're now in the hybrid era?
Um, okay, so there's a bunch of things I quite like to say to that. First of all, I think you put your finger on the central issue here, which is trust. I think there were leadership teams that had very low levels of trust in their people, and when they were forced to change the way they behaved because of COVID, I think that did two things. It demonstrated their low levels of trust because they were highly anxious, but it also then impacted on them the fact that the business didn't collapse. People actually were trustworthy. Work continued. Things got done. So I think those that didn't trust their people had a lesson that people could be trusted. But as you've seen through changes, a lot of them are trying to go back to the way it was before. They're dragging their people back into they have to be present in the office, all of that stuff. I think those people who already trusted their employees, even though, as we all know, it changed overnight and we went from in office to in home, those organizations, many of those organizations where trust was already a foundation for the business, they perform really well throughout the pandemic. And because it had that strong foundation. I think, however, it's the organisations which really do put people first that perform the best. I mean, I've just done a feedback survey for an agency I help, and I mean, I'll read you a quote from one of the team, which is, "Working for you has done more for me than any other job has done before. It's helped me find confidence in myself by putting the skills I have to good use. It's helped me develop my skills by giving me things to do I'd not tackled before. And it's helped me feel part of something bigger than just me."
Wonderful.
Now, the woman who started that agency started it with the vision of giving people who the PR sector was effectively turning their back on because they had made life choices like becoming a mother or whatever, and not making it easy for them to return to work. She decided, I'm going to give these people a real career opportunity by creating a virtual agency from day one, but which allows people to fit their work around their life. And
Yeah.
as you heard from that quote, you can hear in that quote the impact that kind of approach has had on the people that work for her, which is just unbelievably good.
That is. Now
So,
we
I think that if people do really want to put their people first, they've got a really bright future in the whole PR and comms area.
Yeah. Who is the communicator that you admire the most? It could be past, present, it even could be yourself.
No, I don't think it'd be me. So there's two. One is my father, sadly no longer with us. He was professionally brilliant, but personally brilliant as a because he always took an interest in people.
Yeah.
And I remember as quite a young guy where I would follow him into a restaurant, and the way that the people who worked there greeted him just demonstrated that they saw him as a not an important customer, but a decent human. So
Mm.
I've had my father up there, and I know this is probably hackneyed and corny, but I guess the other one it would be Mandela.
Yeah.
Basically, if you think of the way that guy suffered, but how he communicated in a way which brought a completely polarized society together, and was just incredible. And I think that one of the challenges of the world we live in today is it's becoming increasingly polarized,
Mm.
and I think there are a lot of leaders out there who really ought to dip into the Mandela textbook
Yeah.
on how to bring people together rather than to divide them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Crispin, what career advice would you give to your younger self? And I know a lot of that career advice is in your two books, but just for this conversation, what nuggets would you share?
Um, uh, Two things really: develop a clear personal purpose,
Yeah.
use that to make life's most important decisions, and develop your agency as a vehicle to deliver your personal purpose rather than control you. Those would be the two I'd give.
Love that. Absolutely love it. Now, obviously, the public relations industry is considered one of the most stressful industries in the world. Time and time again, when I read these surveys, PR always is in the top 10, if not the top 5. How do you stay sane? What's your sort of mental health and well-being hacks that some of the audience may take away and try?
Uh, I think the first thing is to really understand yourself, um, and all the things that go with that, like energy sources, um, and once you do that, I think you can focus on the things that energize and re-energize, and they're different. I mean, I think, what do I mean by the re-energize? It's in a work environment, particularly the old style command and control work environment, there would be leaders or team leaders who would resent people who were seen having a chat at someone's desk, but when 2 desks down, there was someone pounding away, working hard. And the more you get into the neuroscience of productivity, the more you realize that actually that chat re-energizes. Yeah. And the person goes back and is much better performing than if they just sat there appearing to work. So that's what keeps me sane, is the recognition now that I do need to take time out to re-energize, that I can perform better if my work day could be in shorter blocks of time, and where I split it up doing other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And if the listeners would like to learn more about you, I imagine your books are available. I mean, I bought your second book on Amazon, but they're both on Amazon, I imagine.
Yeah, they're both on Amazon. They're also on a lot of other online book sites and in bookstores. Amazingly, some bookstores have got them. So they can certainly get them there.
Would you recommend people to read them in order?
No, not really. And even the first one, which I co-wrote with Richard Houghton, a great guy, although it's obviously has a chapter 1 and a chapter 10, they're not written to be read sequentially. In fact, if I was reading the first book, I would probably go to the last chapter and read that first.
Yeah.
Because it's all about being good enough to sell so you don't have to.
I mean, I felt that the first one, the Grow, Build, Sell, Live, I think was really good in terms of taking a very holistic approach to running an agency and deep diving into specific areas like purpose and team and new business and clients. And then I felt the second one was really to make you really think about your model and really think hard about how you can break away from the generic mold of a PR agency and actually almost delve into the world of management consulting and just elevate sort of the tactical aspects of PR into being more strategic, which is, I think, where our sort of profession is heading. So thank you so much, Crispin, for such a fascinating conversation. And thank you for sharing your journey with our community. And also, I wanted to thank you, the listeners, for listening. You'll find this episode on the PRCA's YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, alongside other podcasts that have been interviewed by myself or Dan Gold, or both of us. If you like the podcast, then please do share so we can grow our community. If you have any feedback or topics that you'd like us to cover, then please do reach out to myself or to Dan or to the PRCA. We publish the interviews every 2 weeks, so please do stay tuned as we have some inspiring stories in the pipeline.